Hello everyone. Before we dive in, don't forget to like and subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It really helps YouTube show you more stories like this one. Now let's get started. January 14th, 2019. I-90 in South Dakota. Mile marker 217 showed up on my dash a few minutes before everything went wrong. It was 11:47 p.m. according to the clock, the kind of late where the road feels abandoned even when it is not. The sky was low and flat, a dull gray pressed down by snow clouds. The headlights carved out a narrow tunnel, and beyond that tunnel there was nothing. No towns. No trees close enough to matter. Just white and dark stacked on top of each other. The snow had been coming down for hours, not fast, just steady, the kind that wears you down without you noticing. The road had slowly lost its shine, then its texture. At first the lanes faded, then the shoulder. I told myself I could still feel the road through the steering wheel, but that feeling went soft too, like driving over packed sand. I slowed to 20, then 10. I kept looking for reflectors, for anything fixed and solid. There was nothing. That was when the road disappeared. Not blurred. Not covered. Gone. My headlights pointed into a blank white wall that did not change when I turned the wheel. I was no longer sure I was on pavement. I eased to a stop because moving felt worse than stopping. The tires made no sound when I braked. The world felt muted, like cotton stuffed into my ears. I put the car in park and turned on the hazards. The orange lights reflected back at me in the snow, too close, like the world had shrunk. I checked my phone. 1 bar. No signal. The battery was at 32%. I turned the screen off to save it. The heater was still blowing, but it struggled, the air barely warm. The temperature gauge outside read -11. I sat there with both hands on the wheel for a long time, listening to the engine idle. The wind pushed against the car in slow waves. Snow hissed across the hood. I told myself this was normal, that a plow would come through, that I just needed to wait. I did not want to get out. The dark outside the headlights felt thick, like it could swallow me if I stepped into it. After a while, I noticed something off about the way the snow looked near the driver's side door. It was uneven, disturbed. At first I thought it was just wind. Then I leaned closer to the window and realized the shapes were wrong. They were oval, shallow depressions spaced evenly apart. Footprints. They went around the car in a loose circle, not close, not far, like someone pacing. They were already filling with snow, the edges softening, but they were still clear enough to see. What stopped me cold was that they were bare. No boot tread. No shoe pattern. Just the shape of feet pressed directly into the snow. I scanned the area around the car for drag marks, for signs of clothing brushing the surface. There were none. Just those prints appearing, then fading as the snow kept falling. My chest tightened. I checked the mirrors, turning my head slowly, so I would not miss anything. There was no movement. The wind rocked the car again. I locked the doors even though they were already locked. I remember checking twice. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Someone stranded earlier, disoriented, suffering from the cold. Hypothermia makes people do strange things. I had read that. I had also read that people near death from cold sometimes take their clothes off because they feel hot. Knowing that did not make the sight any easier to accept. Time stretched. The clock on the dash crawled forward. Midnight passed without any change. The heater began to blow cooler air. I turned it down to save fuel. My fingers went numb even with gloves on. I rubbed my hands together, then shoved them under my thighs. Every few minutes I leaned forward to check the snow again. The footprints never fully disappeared. New ones appeared where the old ones had been, slightly shifted, like the person was still moving even though I never saw them. At 12:32 a.m., something knocked on my back window. It was not loud. It was not frantic. Just a firm, deliberate tap, the sound of knuckles on glass. My whole body locked up. The sound came from behind my head, close enough that I could feel it in my spine. I did not turn around. I stared straight ahead, eyes fixed on the blank white beyond the windshield. I could hear my own breathing, fast and shallow, fogging the glass. Another tap followed, slower this time. Then nothing. I kept my eyes forward. I did not reach for my phone. I did not unlock the doors. I sat there, rigid, listening for anything. Wind. Engine. Snow. That was it. Minutes passed. My legs started to ache from holding still. Tears leaked out of my eyes without me noticing, blurring my vision. I wiped them away with the back of my glove and kept staring. Eventually the cold crept deeper. My thoughts slowed, edges softening. I remember thinking that I needed to stay awake, that falling asleep would be dangerous. I slapped my thigh a few times, hard enough to feel something. I counted breaths. I watched the fuel gauge drop. At some point the engine coughed and died. The silence that followed was heavy, complete. The hazards stopped flashing. The world outside the headlights vanished because the headlights were gone. Darkness closed in, broken only by the faint glow of the dash before it faded too. I do not remember deciding to move. I remember realizing that my hands were no longer on the wheel. I remember the cold being everywhere, inside my chest, inside my head. I remember pressure against the glass, my palms flat, my fingers spread, trying to push myself upright. The windows were fogged white, then cleared in patches where my hands touched, then fogged again. I must have blacked out. Dawn came slowly, a pale gray light seeping through the snow. The sound woke me before the light did. A low rumble, steady and mechanical. A snowplow. The sound felt unreal at first, like it belonged to a dream. Then it grew louder, closer. I tried to lift my head, and found it resting against the steering wheel. My neck screamed in protest. My hands were stiff and aching, my fingers curled awkwardly. The plow stopped beside me. I could feel the vibration through the ground. Shapes moved outside, blurred by frost. I stayed where I was until the driver opened my door. Cold air rushed in, sharp and painful. Hands grabbed my shoulders and pulled me back. I remember the shock of movement, the way my body resisted, heavy and uncooperative. They wrapped me in a blanket and sat me in the cab of the plow. The heat burned. My skin prickled and hurt. I shook uncontrollably. I kept looking back at my car through the windshield, half expecting to see someone standing there, but there was no one. When the light was better, I saw the footprints clearly. Bare feet, circling the car, leading nowhere. The driver followed my gaze. He did not say anything. He just looked, then looked back at me with a tight expression. Later, when they checked the car, they found the handprints. Frozen into the glass on the back window and the side windows. On the inside, full prints, palms and fingers, pressed hard enough to leave clear shapes where the frost had formed around them. The position matched where someone would brace themselves while trying to sit up or crawl forward. They told me I had severe hypothermia. They said confusion and memory loss were common. They said people sometimes do things they cannot remember, things that do not make sense later. They said it was lucky the plow came when it did. I never told them about the knock. I never told them how the footprints kept appearing while I watched. I know what the explanations are supposed to be. I know what the doctors say. I also know that when I drive past mile marker 217 now, years later, my hands still sweat on the wheel. I keep my eyes on the road. I do not stop. I do not look into the dark on either side, because I know how empty it can be, and how easy it is to leave marks in the snow without meaning to. I pulled off the highway just as the light went flat and gray, the kind that makes everything look like a photo that has been left in the sun too long. The sign for the forest road was half buried in snow. My phone had no signal. The map I saved showed a single cabin at the end of the road. The Airbnb photos showed one building, one porch, one door, one wood stove in the corner. I drove slow, tires crunching, engine working harder with every mile. Snow came down in thick, dry flakes that stuck to the windshield and the hood and the side mirrors. The radio lost stations one by one until there was only static. I shut it off. When I finally reached the clearing, my headlights washed over two cabins. They stood maybe 20 feet apart, the same size, the same shape, the same dark wood siding. Both had a single door facing the clearing. Both had small windows that reflected my lights back at me. The snow between them was smooth except for my tire tracks. I sat there with the engine running, hands on the wheel, watching the snow fall and cover the tracks as fast as they appeared. I got out and the cold hit me hard. It pressed into my face and my chest. The air smelled clean and sharp, like cut pine and metal. The wind pushed snow into my collar. My boots sank into the powder and made a dull sound, like tearing cloth. The forest around the clearing was thick and dark, the trees close together, their branches heavy with snow. The storm swallowed everything. No road noise, no animals, no wind in the trees. Just the soft hiss of snow hitting my jacket. I walked to the first cabin on the left. The door was shut. Frost coated the wood in a thin white layer. Someone had written my name across it with a finger, the letters uneven and shaky, like they were done fast. The frost around the letters was disturbed, the wood showing through darker. My breath fogged up and drifted over the door, blurring the name for a second before it came back into focus. I stood there longer than I meant to. I told myself it was a joke, some weird coincidence, maybe the owner messing around. I told myself the name was common enough. But seeing it there made my stomach tighten. I unlocked the door and went inside. The cabin was cold. The air felt stale, like it had been shut up for a long time. The smell was wood and dust and nothing else. The floor was bare. The table was empty. The wood stove in the corner was cold to the touch, a thin layer of ash inside like it had not been used in days or weeks. The bed was made tight, the blanket folded just like in the photos. No bags. No food. No trash. No signs of anyone being there recently. My breath showed in front of me as I moved through the space. The cold crept into my fingers, even through my gloves. I went back outside and crossed to the second cabin. The door there also had frost on it. My name was written the same way, same size, same slant. It looked like it had been written at the same time as the other one. I felt a rush of heat in my face that had nothing to do with the cold. I opened the door. Warm air rolled out and hit me in the chest. It smelled like burning wood and something else, something heavy and sour that I could not place right away. The fire in the stove was going strong, orange light flickering on the walls. The floor near the door was wet from melted snow. A pair of boots sat on the mat, toes pointed toward the room. They were my boots. Same scuffs on the leather. Same worn laces. Same mud dried into the seams from a hike I took weeks before. I stepped inside without meaning to. The warmth soaked into me fast, into my legs and my hands. My body wanted to stay there. On the table were my gloves, laid flat like I always did, fingers straightened. My jacket hung on the hook by the door, the tear in the sleeve right where I remembered it. There was a bag on the chair with my initials written on the tag. The bed was unmade, the blanket pulled back, the pillow dented like someone had just stood up. The fire popped and shifted. Snow hit the window in soft taps. The storm outside pressed in, thick and close. I backed out and stood between the two doors. Snow fell harder now, piling up around my boots. The wind picked up and pushed it sideways, filling in the space between the cabins. My footprints started to fade. The light from inside the warm cabin glowed yellow on the snow. The cold cabin stayed dark. I tried to think slow. I tried to list facts. 2 cabins. Same name on both doors. One empty and cold. One warm and set up like I was already there. I looked down at my hands. I was still wearing my gloves. They were dry. The gloves on the table in the warm cabin were also dry. I noticed then that the smell inside the warm cabin was stronger when the door opened, a thick feeling in my nose. The fire was burning hot, but the room felt wrong, like the air was too heavy. I looked up at the stovepipe. It ran into the ceiling. Snow piled on the roof outside, heavy and deep. I remembered a news story about vents blocked by snow, about fumes backing up into a room. The storm cut all sound. Even the fire seemed muffled. My head felt tight, like a band around it. I realized how easy it would be to step into the warm cabin, shut the door, and let my body decide for me. How easy it would be to sit down and rest. I turned and went back into the cold cabin. The shock of the cold hit me again. I shut the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. I moved fast, stacking wood in the stove, lighting it with numb fingers. The fire took slow. Smoke leaked into the room at first, then cleared as the draft caught. The warmth came back inch by inch. I kept the window cracked, just enough to let fresh air in. I ate some food from my bag, chewed without tasting it. I stayed awake, pacing, checking the door, listening to the storm bury the clearing. Sometime in the night, the wind shifted. Snow slid off the roof in heavy thumps. I slept in short bursts, always waking to check the stove, to make sure the air felt clean. When light finally crept in through the window, the storm had passed. The world outside was bright and silent, buried under fresh snow. I went outside. The warm cabin was quiet now. No smoke from the chimney. I opened the door and the smell hit me hard, sharp and sour. The fire was out, the room cold. The air felt dead. I understood then what had been waiting there. By noon, a plow came down the road, slow and loud. I packed my things and left. I did not take the boots by the door. I did not look back. I knew which cabin was meant for me, and I knew why the choice felt made before I ever arrived. Erie, Pennsylvania, January 25th, 6:36 p.m. The power went out right as the sky turned dark blue, that thick winter blue that makes the streetlights look weak. The house went quiet in a way I had never heard before. No fridge hum. No furnace click. Just the wind outside and the soft tick of cooling pipes inside the walls. The phone said the outage could last through the night. Snow had been falling all day, heavy and wet, the kind that piles up fast and seals everything shut. I tried to wait it out upstairs at first. I wrapped myself in a coat and sat on the couch, watching my breath fog the air. The temperature dropped fast. The furnace tried once, made a sad metal groan, then stopped for good. I could feel the cold sinking into the floor and climbing up my legs. After an hour, my fingers were stiff and my head ached from the cold. The basement was always warmer in winter. It sat lower, held heat longer. I grabbed a flashlight, extra socks, and a blanket, and went down the steps. The stairs creaked the same way they always did, each step familiar. The basement smelled like concrete, old boxes, and a faint oil smell that never really went away. The flashlight beam cut through the dark and landed on the furnace, silent and dead. Even so, the air down there felt softer, not biting like upstairs. I set up a spot near the washer, wrapped the blanket around me, and sat on the floor. For a while it was quiet. The kind of quiet where you start hearing your own heartbeat. The snow outside pressed against the basement windows, little square windows half buried, glowing faint gray from the streetlight. I checked my phone again. No signal. Battery already low from the cold. That was when I heard it. A sound above me. Slow. Heavy. A footstep. At first I told myself it was the house settling. Old houses make noise, especially in the cold. Wood shrinks. Pipes knock. I had lived here long enough to know that. Still, this sound had weight to it. It moved from one spot to another, not random, not sharp like a pop or a crack. It was a step, then another, spaced like someone walking across the living room. I held my breath without meaning to. The basement suddenly felt too open, too exposed. I listened hard, the way you do when you think you hear something in the dark. The sound stopped. The silence came back, thicker than before. I told myself I was alone. The doors were locked. The snow had piled up against them all day. No one could have come in without leaving tracks, without making noise. I stayed still and waited. A few minutes passed. Then I heard it again. This time closer to the stairs. The sound of weight shifting. The creak of the top step. My mouth went dry. My hands shook so badly the flashlight beam jittered across the wall. I pointed it at the stairs, half expecting to see nothing, half expecting something I did not want to name. The stairs were empty. The light showed dust and old paint, and the same small stain on the third step I had seen 100 times before. I stayed there for a long time. Time stretched out and lost shape. The cold upstairs must have been worse now, I thought. That idea should have been comforting. Instead it made the house feel bigger, like more space for someone to move without me seeing. Then I noticed the basement was getting warmer. At first it was subtle. The cold pull on my ankles eased. My breath stopped fogging so much. I shifted under the blanket, confused. The furnace was still off. There was no power. Heat does not just come back on its own. I stood up and walked closer to the furnace, putting my hand near the metal. It was cold. Dead. The pipes were cold too. The warmth was not coming from them. The air itself felt different. Thicker. Heavy in my chest. The smell changed just a little. Not gas. Not smoke. More like the smell of a closed room that has been shut too long, mixed with sweat and damp clothes. Another sound came from above. Not footsteps this time. A dull thump, like something being set down on the floor. My thoughts raced, then slowed, then raced again. I went through every normal explanation, and none of them fit. I was not asleep. I was not dreaming. I pinched my arm hard enough to leave a mark. The pain was sharp and real. The warmth kept building. It was wrong, the way it climbed so fast. I took off my coat and felt sweat on my back. The basement had never felt like this, not even in summer. I moved toward the bottom of the stairs, each step careful, quiet. The flashlight beam slid up the wall, across the door at the top. The door was closed. I had left it open when I came down. I knew that. I always left it open. The handle was turned sideways, locked. I stood there staring at it. My reflection stared back at me in the dark wood, pale and stretched. The air behind me felt crowded, like the room was smaller than before. I could feel heat at my back now, strong and steady, like standing near another body. I did not turn around right away. I did not want to give whatever was behind me that satisfaction. I listened instead. There was breathing. Slow. Controlled. Not mine. I turned. Someone stood near the far wall, half in shadow, wrapped in layers of dark clothing. Their face was hard to see, but I could see the rise and fall of their chest. I could see steam in the air between us where our heat met. They were close enough that the warmth rolled off them in waves. The basement door at the far end, the one that led outside, was blocked by snow. I remembered seeing it earlier through the small window, packed tight, frozen solid. Whoever this was had been down here before the storm, hiding. Using the basement the way I was now, for warmth. For shelter. The idea settled in my head with a sick clarity. This was not something unreal. This was a person who had been living in my house without me knowing. Their body heat, trapped down here with mine, was turning the basement into a closed box. They shifted their weight, and the floor creaked softly. I stepped back until my shoulder hit the washer. There was nowhere to go. The stairs were locked. The outside door was sealed. The windows were too small. The air grew heavier. Breathing took effort. My head started to swim. I understood then what the real danger was. Not an attack. Not a chase. The danger was being trapped in a sealed space with no power, no airflow, and another person burning oxygen beside me. I dropped the flashlight and grabbed my phone with shaking hands. One bar of signal flickered, then disappeared. I moved toward the small basement window and scraped at the snow with my fingers, frantic. Snow fell inward in clumps, cold air spilling in. The sudden rush made me gasp. The figure behind me moved then, fast. Not toward me, but toward the stairs. The lock rattled. The door shook. The sound of metal scraping metal filled the basement. They were trying to get out too. Panic does not belong to one person alone. It spreads. More snow came loose from the window as I clawed at it. Cold air poured in now, sharp and painful but clean. I breathed it in deep, over and over. The warmth started to break, uneven and patchy. The door at the top of the stairs finally burst open under the pressure of the other side. Snow crashed down the steps in a white wave. Cold flooded the basement. The figure stumbled back, slipping, disappearing into the swirl. I collapsed against the wall, chest burning, head spinning. The basement was chaos of light and cold and noise. Somewhere above, the storm roared. Somewhere outside, sirens cut through the wind, distant but real, called by a neighbor who had seen the door blow open under the weight of snow. I stayed where I was until the cold settled back into the walls and the air felt safe again. The warmth was gone. The space was empty. When I finally looked around, there was no one else there. Later, wrapped in emergency blankets upstairs, I understood how close it had been. Not to something unreal or impossible. Just to another person, hidden and desperate, and a house turned into a trap by snow, silence, and failing heat. February 2nd, Duluth, Minnesota. The clock on the dash said 3:04 a.m., but time felt wrong, stretched thin and dull. Nights like that do not move forward. They just press down on you. I had been plowing since before midnight. The kind of shift where your body goes numb in layers. First the toes, then the fingers, then your thoughts. The storm had rolled in fast, heavy lake-effect snow, thick enough that the headlights felt useless. The beams hit the snow and came straight back at me. White everywhere. No edges. No sky. No ground. Just a tunnel that barely existed. The plow truck rattled like it always did. Metal shaking against metal. The blade scraping and banging as it caught uneven pavement and chunks of ice. The engine noise was steady, almost calming, like breathing. I focused on that sound because it was the only thing that felt solid. I followed the same route I had driven hundreds of times. Residential streets near the lake. Old houses buried up to their windows. Cars half swallowed by drifts. Stop signs reduced to red shapes with white caps. I knew where everything should be, but the storm kept covering it up as fast as I cleared it. I would look in the side mirror and see nothing but smooth snow. No tire tracks. No sign I had passed at all. It was like the road healed itself behind me. The radio had been acting up all night. It crackled with static, cutting in and out. At first I could hear bits of other trucks checking in, then just noise. I adjusted the volume, tapped the side of the unit with my glove. Nothing changed. Eventually even the static faded, and there was only a dead hiss. No voices. No tones. Just silence. That bothered me more than I wanted to admit. You get used to that radio. Even if you never talk, you know someone is there. Without it, the cab felt smaller. Too quiet. The windshield wipers struggled to keep up. Snow piled up faster than they could push it away. Every few seconds the glass went milky, then clear again, then milky. I leaned forward without realizing it, like that could help me see better. That was when I saw the shape in the road. At first it was just a dark smudge where there should not have been one. Something vertical in a world that had gone flat. I eased off the gas, heart picking up speed. As I got closer, the shape sharpened into a person. They were standing right in the center of the lane. No coat, no hat, no gloves. Just a thin shape, arms hanging down, head slightly bent. They were not moving, not turning, not waving, just standing there like they had been dropped into place. My brain tried to catch up. People do stupid things in storms. Drunk walkers. Someone lost. Someone confused. But no coat in that cold did not make sense. It was well below zero with the wind. Skin would burn in minutes. I slowed almost to a stop. The plow blade scraped loudly as I braked. Snow piled up in front of the truck. I stared straight ahead, waiting for them to move. They did not. I remember thinking how quiet it all was. No radio. No wind inside the cab. Just the engine idling and my own breathing, loud in my ears. I came to a full stop. The road ahead was empty. No person. No footprints. No shape at all. Just blowing snow filling in the space where they had been. My headlights cut through nothing. For a second I thought I had imagined it. Whiteout conditions can mess with your eyes. Shapes appear and disappear. The mind fills in gaps. I told myself that as my hands tightened on the wheel. Then I looked down. The top edge of the plow blade, visible just beyond the hood, was dark. Not rust. Not road grime. Dark and wet even in the cold. Red. It did not look like spilled fluid. It was smeared unevenly, streaked along the metal. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like falling through ice. I did not get out of the truck. I could not. I sat there staring, trying to force another explanation into place. Hitting an animal maybe. A deer. But deer do not stand straight up like that. And even then, there should have been something left behind. Fur. A shape. Something. The snow kept falling, heavy and fast. In less than a minute the ground in front of me looked untouched again. Whatever had been there was gone, erased. I reached for the radio again, turning the knob hard this time. Static flared for a moment, then died. No response. I waited, counting my breaths, then tried again. Still nothing. Procedure said to report any collision. Procedure said to stay put. Procedure said a lot of things that did not fit a night like that. I sat there longer than I should have. The cab grew colder. The windows fogged at the edges. Finally I put the truck back in gear. Sitting still felt worse. I drove. Every block felt wrong after that. I watched the road harder than ever, scanning for shapes, for movement. My shoulders ached from being tense. The storm did not let up. The snow kept covering everything behind me, wiping me out as soon as I passed. I checked the mirrors again and again. Nothing. Just white. I tried the radio every few minutes. Dead each time. As I kept going, the streets started to feel unfamiliar. Houses blurred together. Landmarks vanished. Corners I knew well seemed to come too soon or too late. I told myself it was the visibility, that I was just tired. The red on the blade froze dark and dull, crusted along the edge. I could see it every time I slowed. I made it to the end of my route without realizing it. The usual turn toward the yard came up, and I took it automatically. The entrance was half buried, but I followed the faint outline and pulled in. The yard lights were on, glowing weak yellow through the snow. Other trucks were parked where they should be, lined up and silent, engines off. No movement. No people. I parked my truck and shut it down. The sudden quiet was heavy. Snow ticked against the cab. I sat there for a long time before I finally opened the door. The cold hit me hard, sharp and immediate. I climbed down slowly, my boots sinking deep. I walked around to the front of the truck. Up close, the blade was worse. The red was not just on the edge. It was packed into seams and bolts, frozen solid. There were small dark clumps stuck underneath. I felt sick. I did what I was supposed to do next. I went into the office. The lights were on. The desks were empty. The radio console was silent. No notes. No messages. The clock on the wall read 3:04 a.m. The same time as the dash. Later, when the storm cleared and the day crews came in, everything turned loud and real again. Reports were made. Police were called. They searched the route I had driven. They found nothing. No body. No blood on the road. No sign of anything unusual. They tested the truck. The blade. They said it could have been road debris mixed with old stains. They said whiteouts play tricks on drivers. They said exhaustion causes false memories. I listened. I nodded. There was nothing else to do. But a week later, after the snowbanks shrank and the roads widened, A missing person report came across the local news. A man last seen walking late at night, no coat, disoriented. The area matched my route. The time frame matched my shift. They never found him. I still plow those roads. I still work night shifts when the storms hit. The radio works fine now. The routes make sense again. But every time the snow gets heavy enough to erase my tracks, I feel that same pressure in my chest. Because I know what it feels like to keep moving when the storm covers everything behind you. I know what it feels like to leave nothing behind. And I know that sometimes the road does not remember what you do on it, even when you do. The night had been flat and endless, the kind of winter drive that feels longer than it should because there is nothing to look at except snow and dark fields. Rural Alberta in late December has a way of swallowing sound and light. The snowbanks were taller than the hood in places, packed hard by plows and wind. The sky was low and gray, pushing down on the road. My headlights cut a narrow tunnel, and everything outside that tunnel might as well not exist. It was December 28th, 10:11 p.m., according to the clock on the dash. I remember checking it because I was counting the minutes to get home. The heater hummed, pushing out dry air that smelled faintly of dust. The steering wheel felt cold through my gloves. The road was straight and empty, a two-lane highway with no shoulder in some spots, just a hard drop into the ditch. Snow blew sideways across the pavement, thin sheets of it skittering like living things. My phone rang once. Just once. The sound was sharp and out of place in the quiet car. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Before I could even think about answering, the ringing stopped. The phone went dark again. I told myself it was nothing. Wrong number. Spam. I put my eyes back on the road. A second later, the phone buzzed in my cup holder. A voicemail notification popped up, even though it had not rung again. That made my stomach tighten. I had been driving through bad service for the last hour. Calls dropped. Messages came late. Still, something about it felt off. I waited a few seconds before picking it up, like waiting would make it less strange. The voicemail was short. Too short. It was my own voice. I knew it the same way you know your own face, even if you hate hearing it recorded. The voice sounded close, like it had been recorded in a small space. It was low and rushed. It said not to stop the car no matter what. It warned me not to slow down. There were no background sounds, no wind, no engine noise. Just my voice, whispering like I was afraid someone was nearby. My hands tightened on the wheel. I told myself there had to be a simple reason. Pocket recording. Some app glitch. Maybe I had said it as a joke days ago and forgotten. But I knew that was not true. I had never recorded anything like that. I had never even thought those words before. The storm picked up. Snow hit the windshield harder, rattling like sand. The wipers squeaked as they dragged ice across the glass. The road surface went from black to gray, then back again. I eased off the gas without thinking, just a little. The car responded slowly, heavy with winter tires and packed snow. That was when the headlights caught movement ahead. At first it was just a shadow crossing the beam, low and fast. My brain went straight to animals. Deer. Moose. I had grown up here. I knew what hit the road at night. I pressed the brake lightly, feeling the car settle. The anti-lock system shuddered under my foot. The movement ahead did not resolve into legs or eyes. It stayed wrong. Too low for a moose. Too uneven for a deer. The voicemail replayed in my head, even though the phone was dark again. My own voice telling me not to stop. My foot hovered, torn between instinct and fear. Snow blew thicker, turning the headlights into a white wall. I slowed more, heart pounding hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. As I got closer, the shape broke apart into pieces. Debris. A vehicle. What was left of one. A pickup truck sat sideways across part of the lane, its rear end down in the ditch. The front end was crushed in, metal folded like paper. One headlight was still on, throwing a weak yellow beam into the snow. The other was dark. The hood was bent up, blocking part of the windshield. Snow had already started to cover the tire tracks leading into the ditch. My first thought was to stop and help. That is what you do. Out here, people stop. People help because there is no one else. I eased the brake again, slower now, careful not to slide. The car crept forward. The road narrowed where the truck sat, forcing me closer to the center line. My pulse thudded in my ears. Then I saw the marks on the road. They were not skid marks. They were long, uneven grooves, like something heavy had been dragged across the ice. They started near the truck and led into the darkness on the other side of the road, disappearing into the ditch opposite. The snow around them was churned up, dirty and brown underneath. Something had scraped down to the gravel. The smell hit next. Not smoke. Not gas. It was a sharp, metallic smell mixed with something sour. It filled the car even with the windows closed, carried in by the heater. I swallowed hard, trying not to think about it. I slowed almost to a crawl. My eyes searched the cab of the truck. The windshield was spiderwebbed, caved inward. The driver's door hung open, bent at a wrong angle. The inside was dark. No movement. No hazard lights. No phone screen glowing. Just that one headlight, steady and weak. The urge to stop was strong. I pictured someone injured in the snow, freezing. I pictured myself driving past and finding out later it had been too late. My foot pressed the brake a little more. That was when I noticed the footprints. They were not normal footprints. They were wide and deep, spaced too far apart. They led away from the open door, across the road, following the drag marks. The snow around them was stained darker in places. The prints did not circle back. They went straight into the ditch and beyond, toward the open fields. A memory surfaced then, uninvited. A news story from years ago. A hit and run on a rural highway. A driver who stopped and never made it home. They said exposure. They said confusion. They never explained the marks found later in the snow. My chest felt tight. The voicemail came back to me again, clearer now. My voice had not sounded joking. It had sounded scared. It had sounded like I knew exactly what was about to happen. I took my foot off the brake and pressed the gas. The engine growled, protesting the sudden demand. The car surged forward, tires gripping and slipping at the same time. I steered wide, giving the wreck as much space as the road allowed. As I passed, the open door of the truck creaked slightly in the wind. Snow blew through the cab, swirling inside like smoke. For a split second, my headlights caught something down in the ditch on the far side. Something low and moving, crawling or dragging itself through the snow toward the road. It was not shaped right. It did not move like an animal. I did not look long enough to see more. I kept my eyes forward and my foot down. The road ahead opened up again, empty and straight. The storm swallowed everything behind me. I did not slow until my hands started to shake and my breathing turned shallow. I drove another 20 minutes before I dared ease off the gas. I did not stop until I reached the first town with lights. I pulled into a gas station lot, the kind that never really closes. I sat there with the engine running, staring at the snow piled around the pumps. My phone buzzed again. Another voicemail notification. My stomach dropped. I did not want to open it, but I did anyway. This one was longer. It was still my voice. It sounded strained, breathless. There were background sounds this time, wind and metal creaking. I could hear an engine idling somewhere close. The voice was explaining what had happened, describing the wreck, the footprints, the thing in the ditch. It said the call might not go through. It said if I got this, I had to keep driving. It said that stopping had almost killed me. I checked the call details. The voicemail timestamp was from earlier that night, just after 9. An hour before the first ring. At that time, according to my memory, I had been driving the same road, just farther back, before the storm got worse. I searched my recent calls. There it was. An outgoing call to my own number. No duration listed. Pieces slid into place slowly, like ice shifting. I remembered pulling over briefly around that time, to clear snow from the headlights. I remembered slipping on the ice, hitting my head lightly on the door frame. I remembered feeling shaken, cold, and suddenly certain that stopping was a bad idea. I must have recorded the voicemail then, without really knowing why. I must have sent it to myself, hoping it would reach me later when I needed it. I sat there for a long time, letting the heater run, listening to the wind push against the building. Eventually, I drove home the rest of the way without incident. The next morning, I checked the news. There was a short report about a single vehicle crash on a rural highway the night before. No mention of survivors. No mention of footprints. I did not drive that road again for months. When I finally did, the ditch was smooth and white, the snow plowed clean. There was no sign anything had ever happened there. My phone has never done anything like that since. The voicemail is still saved, though. I do not listen to it anymore. I do not need to. I already know what it says, and I know now that sometimes the only reason you make it home is because you listened to yourself when it mattered most. The first thing I noticed when I stepped onto the lake was the sound of my own boots. It was a dry, hollow crunch, not the soft snow sound I wanted. The lake was frozen flat and wide, a white sheet with a dusting of fresh snow that hid the cracks and old pressure lines underneath. I stood at the edge longer than I meant to, watching the light fade. January light in the Upper Peninsula drops fast. At 4:50 p.m. the sky already looked tired, gray and thin, like it wanted to quit early. I had heard the rule more than once. The ice is safe as long as you don't hear singing. People said it like a joke, like something old-timers repeat to scare kids. I didn't believe in that kind of thing. I believed in thickness, in temperature charts, in weeks of below-zero nights. The lake had been frozen solid for a long time. Snowmobiles crossed it every day. Trucks had crossed it earlier in the season. I told myself that rules like that were just ways to remember to pay attention. I adjusted the straps of my pack and stepped out. Each step sent a small shock through my legs, a stiff feeling that came from knowing there was water below. I kept my weight even, didn't rush, didn't stomp. The wind pushed against my face from the west. It carried that clean, sharp smell of cold metal and pine. My nose burned. My eyelashes stuck together when I blinked too slow. As I walked, I noticed how quiet everything was except for the wind. No birds. No engines. No voices. The shoreline behind me already looked far away, darker than the open ice. Ahead of me was nothing but white and a low ridge of trees on the far side. I had crossed smaller lakes before, but this one felt bigger, flatter, more open. The snow on top was smooth, with only a few drift lines where the wind had shaped it. Halfway across, the wind stopped. It didn't slow down or fade out. It stopped all at once, like someone had turned it off. The cold felt heavier without it, pressing down instead of sliding past. The snowflakes that had been blowing sideways now fell straight down. They dropped in thin lines, clean and even, landing without sound. I stopped walking without meaning to. That was when I heard it. At first I thought it was my blood moving in my ears, that soft rushing you get when it's very quiet. Then I realized it had a shape. A rise and fall. Not words. Not a tune I knew. Just a loose, uneven hum, off-key and slow, coming from below my feet. It wasn't loud. It didn't echo. It felt close, like it was right under the ice. I told myself it was ice noise. Lakes make sounds when they shift. Pressure builds and releases. I knew that. I had heard pops and cracks before. This was different. This was steady. It lasted long enough for me to count my breaths. The sound vibrated up through my boots, faint but real. I took another step. The hum stopped. I waited. Nothing. No wind. No hum. Just my breathing and the far-off creak of trees on shore. I took 2 more steps, slow and careful. The hum came back, lower this time, like it had moved farther away. My skin prickled under my coat. I felt stupid for being scared of a sound I couldn't even explain well to myself. Then the ice answered back. A crack ran under my left foot, sharp and sudden. It didn't break through, but it traveled fast, a thin white line spreading out like a spiderweb. Another crack followed, then another, not random, but spaced like knocks. 1. Pause. 2. Pause. 3. They came from different directions, crossing and meeting, forming rough shapes in the snow. I froze in place. I could feel the lake moving under me, not sinking, but flexing. The hum shifted again, now broken, uneven, like something under tension. The ice made a low groan, deep and slow, the sound of something heavy settling into a new position. I knew then that I had waited too long. The light was fading fast. The sky had turned a dull blue-gray, and the surface of the lake was losing contrast. Cracks were harder to see. Distance felt wrong. The far shore looked no closer than before. I turned back the way I came. The first step went fine. The second sent a ripple through the ice that I felt in my knees. The cracks I had crossed earlier were wider now, thin dark lines showing through the snow. Water hadn't come up yet, but I could tell it was close. The hum returned, louder than before, not a song, just a vibration, like wind pushing through a long pipe. The ice cracked again, this time in a circle around my right foot. I pulled it up fast and nearly lost my balance. My heart was pounding hard enough that I felt it in my throat. I forced myself not to run. Running would spread my weight wrong. I had learned that. Slow. Even. Calm. Another crack. This one broke through. My boot punched into black water up to my ankle. The cold hit like a hammer. It stole my breath and sent a sharp pain up my leg. I yanked my foot out and staggered forward, water spilling onto the ice. Steam rose for a second before the air took it away. I didn't think anymore. I moved. I went low, dropping to my knees, then my stomach, spreading my weight as wide as I could. The ice groaned under me, a long, deep sound that made my teeth buzz. I crawled, dragging myself forward with my elbows, pushing with my toes, keeping my body flat. The hum was everywhere now, not louder, but closer, like the whole lake was holding it. The cracks followed me. Lines opened and met, forming jagged shapes that filled with dark water. I could hear the water moving under the ice, a slow, heavy shift. My gloves were soaked. My sleeves were wet to the elbows. The cold crept in fast, biting and numb at the same time. I didn't look back. I kept my eyes on the dark shape of the shore, the trees standing still and solid. Each movement felt slow, like the air had thickened. My arms burned. My legs shook. The ice dipped under my chest once, enough that water spilled over the surface and soaked through my coat. I let out a sound without meaning to, a short breath pushed out hard. The hum stopped. For one terrible second, everything went quiet. No cracks. No groans. No wind. I felt the ice sag under my weight, not breaking, but bending, like a loaded shelf. I pressed myself flatter, cheek against the ice, feeling the cold through my hat. I stayed still until my lungs started to ache. Then the ice settled. I crawled again, slower now, careful to test each movement. The cracks didn't chase me anymore. They stayed behind, thin black scars spreading and freezing over at the edges. The shore crept closer, tree trunks gaining detail, snow clinging to low branches. I could smell land again, that mix of wood and earth under snow. When my hands finally touched solid ground, I didn't stand right away. I rolled onto the bank and lay there, chest heaving, staring up at the darkening sky. My clothes were stiff and wet. My fingers were numb and white. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. I stayed there long enough for my breathing to slow and the shaking to ease. The lake behind me was quiet again, smooth and flat, already hiding what it had done. Snow kept falling straight down, covering the cracks, erasing the signs. I made it back to my vehicle before full dark. I cranked the heat and stripped off wet layers with clumsy hands. My feet burned as they warmed. I sat there for a long time, watching the trees blur through the windshield as my eyes watered. I don't tell the story like a warning about singing. I don't say the lake was alive or angry. I say the ice changed fast and without care, the way it can when pressure shifts and cold lies to you. I say that sound carries strange over frozen water, and that you should listen when something feels wrong, even if you can't explain it. I never crossed that lake again. When winter comes now, and the lakes freeze flat and white, I stay on shore. I watch from solid ground as snowmobiles trace lines across the ice. Sometimes, when the wind drops and the snow falls straight down, I remember the hum under my boots and the way the ice answered back. And I leave before the quiet gets too deep. The storm had already been going for hours by the time I pulled off the highway. Snow came down sideways, thick and loud, hitting the windshield so hard it felt like gravel. The truck stop motel sat alone against the dark, a low building with flickering lights, and a parking lot packed with long-haul trucks idling like tired animals. My hands were stiff from the cold when I opened the door. The air smelled like diesel, wet wool, and burned coffee. Inside, the lobby was small and overheated. A space heater hummed behind the counter. The clerk slid a key across to me, without lifting his head. I noticed the number stamped into the metal tag, because I always check room numbers twice. 214. He made a note on a clipboard and pointed down the hall. There was a wall clock behind him that read 1:22 a.m. He wrote something else and moved on like I was already gone. He also mentioned the storm would last days, not hours. That part stuck with me more than it should have. The hallway smelled like old carpet and bleach. The lights buzzed. The carpet pattern made my eyes feel tired, like it was moving under my feet. I found the door at the end of the second-floor hallway, right near the ice machine that rattled every few minutes. Room 214. The key stuck when I turned it. I had to put my shoulder into the door to get it open. The room was small and cold. One bed, thin blanket, stiff pillows. A table with a chair that leaned to one side. A TV bolted to the wall with a remote taped together. The heater rattled when I turned it on, pushing out air that smelled dusty and old. I dropped my bag on the floor and sat on the bed. The mattress sagged in the middle. I could hear trucks outside, engines revving, doors slamming, chains clanking. Somewhere above me, water moved through pipes. I checked the lock before I lay down. The deadbolt slid into place, but it felt loose. I pressed on the door with my shoulder. It held. I kept my boots on anyway. I always do that in places like this. I turned off the light and stared at the ceiling, watching headlights sweep past the window. Snow kept hitting the glass like someone throwing handfuls of sand. Sleep came slow. My mind kept going over the drive, the storm, the way the clerk never looked up. I must have drifted off because the sound that woke me felt like it came from inside a dream. Metal scraping metal. The door handle moved. The lock rattled. I sat up so fast my neck hurt. The handle turned again, slower this time, like someone trying to be careful. The key slid into the lock. It turned halfway and stopped. Whoever was outside pulled it out and tried again. Same result. Again. The sound was calm, patient, like this was expected. I held my breath. The heater kicked on and off. The ice machine down the hall clanged. The key turned once more, harder, then stopped. I waited for knocking, for someone to realize the mistake and leave. Nothing happened. After a long minute, the footsteps moved away. I did not sleep after that. I sat on the edge of the bed with my phone in my hand, the screen lighting the room in a dull blue. At exactly 2 a.m., the handle moved again. This time the key went all the way in. It turned fully, smoothly, like it belonged there. The deadbolt stopped it. The door shook as pressure leaned into it. Not a lot. Just enough to test it. The key came out. Went back in. Turned. The deadbolt held. Whoever it was did not rush. They tried again and again, the same careful motion each time. No anger. No panic. Just persistence. I stood and pressed my back to the wall near the bathroom, keeping my weight off the floor so it would not creak. I could see the thin line of light under the door flicker as someone shifted outside. The smell of cigarette smoke slipped through the crack. The key tried again. When it failed, the handle went still. After a while, the footsteps left. I waited until my legs started to shake before I moved. I checked the lock again. My hands were sweating. I sat on the bed and stared at the door. I did not hear anyone else in the hall. No voices. No doors opening. Just the storm and the trucks. I used my phone to call the front desk. It rang once before being answered. I told the person who picked up that someone kept trying to get into my room. I gave the room number. There was a pause long enough that I thought the call dropped. Then the person on the other end said that there was no such room in their system. That the second floor ended at 213. That no guest should be where I was. I did not argue. I did not explain. I ended the call and sat there, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the empty line. My heart felt like it was hitting the inside of my ribs. I looked around the room again. The number on the door. The tag on the key. Everything said 214. I noticed things I had missed before. The room did not have the same artwork as the others I passed. The carpet was older, more worn. The smoke detector was missing, just a hole in the ceiling. The phone on the nightstand had no cord. When I checked the window, it did not open. It was sealed shut with paint. At 2:37 a.m., the key tried again. This time it did not stop at the deadbolt. The door shook harder, like someone leaning their full weight into it. I could hear breathing through the wood. Slow and steady. The deadbolt creaked. I imagined it snapping, and the door swinging open. I grabbed my bag and shoved it against the door, wedging it under the handle. I dragged the chair over and jammed it beneath the knob. The wood groaned as pressure pushed from the other side. The key kept turning, fast now, angry. Then it stopped. The footsteps did not leave this time. They stood right outside the door. I could see the shadow under the crack. It stayed there for a long time. Long enough that my legs went numb and my mouth went dry. I thought about the storm. About how far I was from anywhere. About how nobody knew exactly where I was. When the shadow finally moved, it did not go down the hall. It went into the wall beside my door. The sound was wrong. Like a panel sliding. Like something closing behind it. I waited until the sky outside the window started to turn gray. I did not sleep. I did not sit down. When the hallway finally filled with morning noise, doors opening, boots on carpet, I pulled the chair away and opened my door. The hallway looked shorter than it had the night before. The ice machine was gone. Where my door had been was a blank section of wall with fresh paint that did not quite match. No number. No frame. Just wall. I walked downstairs and left the key on the counter. The clerk was different this time, or maybe I just noticed him better. He looked at the key like it was something he had lost a long time ago. He did not say anything. Neither did I. I drove away as soon as my car warmed up, tires crunching over fresh snow. When I checked the motel in the daylight from the road, there were only 2 floors and the windows lined up clean and even. No gaps. No missing rooms. I kept driving until the storm faded behind me. I did not stop until the sun was fully up and the road was clear. Even then, every time I locked a door or heard a key turn somewhere nearby, my chest tightened. I know now that I was never meant to be in that room, and whoever kept trying that key was not making a mistake. They were trying to finish something that had already started, and I left before they could. School was canceled at 6:12 a.m. The automated call woke me up, the same flat voice telling parents and kids what the weather already had. By the time I got out of bed, the house felt quieter than it ever does on a weekday. No buses, no engines starting, no distant shouts, just the low hum of the heater and the soft ticking from the kitchen clock. I pulled the blinds up in the living room. Snow was pressed high against the windows, almost to the bottom of the glass, like the house had sunk into it overnight. The street was gone, just a smooth white stretch where I knew the road and sidewalks were. No tire marks, no footprints. The neighbors' cars were buried to the mirrors. The air looked thick, heavy, like it would be hard to breathe outside. I made coffee and stood at the sink, watching the backyard. The fence line was barely visible under the snow piled against it. The old oak at the back had bowed under the weight, its branches sagging low and stiff. Everything looked sealed off, cut away from the rest of the world. It felt good at first, like being wrapped up and hidden. That was when I noticed the child. He was standing near the fence, maybe 10 feet from it, in the open part of the yard where I usually let the dog run. He was small, thin, wearing dark pants and a sweatshirt. No coat, no hat. His back was to me, his head tilted slightly down like he was looking at the snow at his feet. I remember waiting for my brain to catch up, telling myself I was still half asleep. Kids wander sometimes. Maybe a neighbor's kid had cut through before the storm really hit. But the longer I stared, the more wrong it felt. The snow was smooth all the way from the fence to the back door. There were no marks at all. No trail leading to him. Nothing behind him either. I leaned closer to the glass. He didn't move. The wind wasn't strong, but it was enough to sting, enough that being outside without a coat would hurt. I watched his shoulders, expecting to see them shaking. They were still. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes with the back of my hand. When I looked again, he was closer. Not by much, but enough that I noticed right away. A few feet nearer the house. Still facing away. Still no footprints in the snow between us. My chest tightened. I scanned the yard, the fence, the trees, looking for something that would explain it. A trick of light. A shadow. But the yard was empty except for him. I stepped back from the window. The coffee tasted bitter in my mouth. I told myself to put on boots and a coat, to go out there and ask if he was okay, but my body didn't move. Every part of me felt like it was leaning away from the back door. When I looked again, he was closer still. Close enough now that I could see the wet shine on the shoulders of his sweatshirt where snow had settled. Close enough that I could tell his hair was damp, flattened to his head. I moved fast then. I set the mug down hard enough that coffee sloshed over the rim. I walked to the back door and flipped the lock, then slid the deadbolt into place. The sound of it clicking shut felt too loud in the quiet house. I stood there, my hand still on the bolt, listening. The heater kicked on. The clock kept ticking. Outside, nothing moved. Then I heard the child's voice behind me. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was calm, like a question asked out of real confusion. The words weren't shouted or whispered, just spoken plainly, right near my shoulder. The meaning of it hit me all at once. He was asking why I hadn't let him in sooner. I didn't turn around right away. My eyes went to the reflection in the dark window glass. I could see my own face, pale and tight, and behind me nothing. The hallway was empty. The door to the basement was closed. The stairs upstairs were bare. I turned anyway. The kitchen was the same as it had been minutes before. Chairs pushed in. Backpack by the door from the day before. No child. I checked the locks on every door. Front door. Garage door. Basement door. All locked. All untouched. I walked through the house room by room, opening closets, checking behind shower curtains, looking under beds. Nothing. No sign anyone had been inside. No wet footprints. No dropped gloves. No open windows. When I came back to the living room, the yard was empty. The spot where the child had stood was smooth again, like it had never been disturbed. I called the police. My voice shook when I tried to explain. A child in the yard. No coat. No footprints. A voice in my house. They said they would send someone when they could get through. While I waited, I kept replaying the morning in my head. I realized something then that made my stomach drop. When I had first gotten up, before the coffee, before the blinds, I had heard a sound near the back door. A soft thud. I had assumed it was snow sliding off the roof. Hours later, a cruiser finally pushed its way down the street. The officer walked the yard with slow, careful steps, his boots sinking deep. He found something near the fence line, half buried. A small shoe. Wet. Frozen stiff. They found the rest of him not far from there, curled up against the fence where the wind would have cut the worst. A neighbor's kid. Reported missing just after the storm started the night before. He had tried to cut through yards to get home. He hadn't made it. The officer asked if I had heard or seen anything during the night. I thought about the thud. About the unlocked back door I always double-check, but hadn't that night. About the damp smell in the kitchen that morning that I had blamed on wet boots from the day before. The house felt different after that. Too quiet. Too full of small sounds. I keep the blinds closed now. I keep the doors locked all the time. I still think about the way the yard looked untouched, like nothing had crossed it at all. I know now why there were no footprints. The wind had been blowing all night, steady and sharp, filling everything in. I know how cold it was, how fast the body can shut down. I know that if I had opened the door when I first heard that sound, things would have ended differently. That's what makes it worse. Not the voice. Not the yard. It's knowing the morning gave me a chance, and I didn't take it. The avalanche hits, without a sound I remember. 1 second the slope is quiet, the stars sharp and cold, my headlamp cutting a narrow tunnel of light through the falling snow. The next second the ground disappears and the world turns into weight. It is not a wall crashing into me. It is the earth letting go. I am carried, rolled, folded in on myself. Snow fills my mouth and nose. My helmet slams against something hard, and then something soft. I try to grab at anything, but there is nothing to grab. The force presses the air out of my lungs, and I don't get it back right away. My pack twists under me, and my legs go numb from the pressure. Then everything stops. The silence after is thick. No wind. No sound of moving snow. Just a deep, packed stillness, like being sealed inside a room that was never meant to exist. I try to move my arms, and they do not move. They are pinned against my chest, elbows bent in a way that already hurts. My right hand is near my face, my left trapped lower, crushed against my ribs. My legs are spread and twisted, one knee bent under me. The snow is not fluffy anymore. It is dense, heavy, packed tight around every part of me. It holds my body in place like wet cement. I try to take a full breath and I can't. My chest expands only a little before the snow pushes back. I take short, shallow breaths, and each one sounds loud inside my head. The air smells clean and cold, but there is not much of it. I can feel my heartbeat in my ears. It is fast and hard, like it is trying to break out. I tell myself to stay calm. I have read about this. Panic uses oxygen. Panic kills. I try to slow my breathing, but my body doesn't listen. Every breath feels like it might be the last one that fits. Darkness presses against my eyes. My headlamp is gone or crushed or buried facing the wrong way. There is no light. I do not know which way is up. I try to spit out snow, and it only makes my mouth drier. My tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. My lips feel raw and cold. Time stretches. Seconds feel long. Minutes feel endless. I think about the temperature, how cold it must be, how the snow will keep me insulated at first. I think about how people survive avalanches if they have an air pocket. I try to move my face to make space, and I manage to wiggle my nose just a little. Snow shifts and presses tighter. The pressure increases around my chest, and I stop moving. I listen. At first there is nothing but my breathing and my heart. Then faintly I feel it, a vibration, a distant thump that is not my pulse. It comes again, stronger this time. Snow shifts somewhere above me. My heart jumps. Someone is out there. The thumps become more regular. Scraping sounds follow, muffled but clear enough to understand. Snow is being moved. Shoveled. Dug. Each scrape sends a small shower of cold grains down onto my face. Relief hits me so hard it almost hurts. My body tries to breathe deeper, faster. I want to scream. I want to shout that I am here, that I am alive. I open my mouth and try anyway. No sound comes out. The snow fills my mouth again and I cough, wasting air. I try to move my right hand, to wave, to scratch, to do anything. It shifts maybe an inch. Pain shoots through my shoulder. I stop. The digging gets closer. The pressure on my chest eases just a little. Enough that I can pull in a slightly bigger breath. Cold air brushes my cheek. There is a gap forming near my face. I can feel it. Hope is a physical thing now, warm and sharp in my chest. The scraping slows. The snow above me shifts differently. Not being removed, but pressed. Packed. The gap near my face shrinks. The cold air disappears. I freeze, not from the cold, but from the sudden understanding that settles in. The movements above me are careful now. Controlled. Snow is being placed back, not falling by accident. It is being pushed down, smoothed over. The pressure returns to my chest, heavier than before. My nose is pressed sideways. Snow fills the small space I had. My breathing turns ragged. I try to move again, to fight, to kick, but my body is locked in place. Every effort just tightens the snow more. The digging stops completely. The silence comes back, deeper than before. No vibrations. No scraping. Just the weight of the mountain resting on me. My thoughts race, then scatter. I try to make sense of it. I try to think of reasons. Maybe they thought it was just debris. Maybe they were afraid of another slide. Maybe they ran out of time. The explanations do not matter. The result is the same. Air becomes precious. Each breath is smaller than the last. My chest aches. My throat burns. I swallow, and there is nothing to swallow. My fingers tingle, then start to go numb. The cold creeps in slowly, not sharp but dull, like my body is being wrapped in something heavy and quiet. I focus on details to stay present. The way the snow presses unevenly against my face. The faint taste of metal from my mouth guard. The slow drip of melted snow down my neck that makes me shiver. The steady, stubborn beat of my heart, still trying. Time loses meaning. I drift in and out of awareness. Images come and go without order. The trailhead earlier that night. The crunch of snow under my boots. The clear sky. The feeling that I should have turned back. My breathing turns into gasps. My vision fills with dark spots even though my eyes are closed. There is a ringing in my ears that grows louder, then softer, like waves pulling back from shore. I think about the person above me, the hands that were so close I could almost feel skin. I think about how easy it would have been to dig just a little more. The thought makes something inside me break, and then even that feeling fades. The cold is everywhere now. Not just on my skin, but deeper. My body feels heavy and distant. The panic drains away, replaced by a strange calm. My breaths slow, not because I choose them to, but because there is nothing left to give. The last thing I am aware of is the weight. The mountain holding me still. The snow packed tight around my face, sealing everything in place. Then my thoughts thin out, stretch, and finally stop, and the darkness that has been pressing in from all sides closes completely.